Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim.
On behalf of Zaytuna College, our faculty, our staff, our students, we welcome you this evening. I have one announcement to make that we had a call earlier this afternoon that our scheduled speaker, the pastor Michael McBride, has fallen ill and will not be joining us this evening. The good news is that we have found a very worthy replacement in the Reverend Curtis Flemming. So the show will go on, and we thank God for that. But first things first, as is with our tradition, we will start the evening off with a recitation of the Quran. I ask our esteemed guest, Imam Ibrahim, Rahim, from the Lighthouse Masjid in Oakland, California, to please come to the stage and begin our program with the words of Allah. After Imam Ibrahim's recitation, we will have a translation from Ayisha Ibrahim, a Zaytuna College student class of 17 members.
أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم يا أيها الذين آمنوا اتقوا الله يا أيها الذين آمنوا اتقوا الله حق تقاته ولا تموتن إلا وأنتم مسلمون واعتصموا بحبل الله جميعا واعتصموا بحبل الله جميعا بحبل الله جميعا ولا تفرقوا واذكروا نعمة الله عليكم واذكروا نعمة الله عليكم إذ كنتم أعداء فألف بين قلوبكم فأصبحتم بنعمته إخوانا وكنتم على شفا حفرة من النار فأنقذكم منها كذلك يبين الله لكم آياته لعلكم تهتدون. ولتكن منكم أمة يدعون إلى الخير ولتكن منكم أمة يدعون إلى الخير ويأمرون بالمعروف وينهون عن المنكر وأولئك هم المفلحون. صدق الله العظيم.
In the name of God, the benevolent, the merciful. O believers, be conscious of God with due reverence, and do not die without your having surrendered to God. And hold fast to the rope of God, everyone, and do not split up. And remember God's favor to you, for you were enemies, and God united your hearts, so you became brethren. By the grace of God, and you were on the brink of a pit of fire, and God rescued you from it. Thus does God manifest signs of the divine to you, that you may be guided. And let there be a people among you who invite to good and enjoin what is fair, and forbid what is repugnant. It is they who will thrive.
Next, I would like to call to the stage Sister Raja Ali, who is a Zaytuna student from the class of 2017. She is the Amira of the student group Third Resurrection at Zaytuna College, who has worked tirelessly over their winter break and since they arrived back on campus a few weeks ago to put this together with other members of the group. There were a few times when I was receiving phone calls from students that were traveling back and forth and getting off of a bus and into a taxi to ask questions about how the event would happen. So we thank them for that. And we thank you, Raja, and the group. And we ask you to please join us on stage for a few short remarks. Thank you.
Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. Alhamdulillah Rabbil Alameen. Wa salatu wa salam ala Sayyidil al-Mursaleen wa ala alihi wa sahbihi ajma'een. I begin in the name of Allah, the most merciful, and I send prayers and peace upon His beloved prophet and messenger. On behalf of the Third Resurrection at Zaytuna College, I would like to thank you all, both those here and those tuning in at live stream. This is our first event of the month honoring Black history, and use this opportunity to thank our speakers, President Shaykh Hamza Yusuf, and founder Imam Zaid Shakir, as well as our esteemed guest, Reverend Flemming. As mentioned, my name is Rajat Ali, and I'm a Zaytuna College student from the class of 2017, and the Amira, or president of the student organization that initiated tonight's Black History Month event, under the theme, Remember Malcolm. And if any of you post anything on social media this evening, please use that hashtag, Remember Malcolm. I'm sure that you are all wondering, what is the third resurrection at Zaytuna College? And we affectionately call it the Third Res. The Third Res is a student-led organization dedicated to exploring topics connecting Islam and racial identity in a contemporary context, in which we use Dr. Sherman Jackson's book, Islam and the Black American, Looking Towards the Third Resurrection, as a source text to inform our direction towards service and scholarship. Further, we aim to inform ourselves and others about Islam in the African diaspora, focusing on its rich history in the United States. In my efforts towards fulfilling the mission of the college, Dr. Jackson's book brings meaning to my experience as a Zaytuna student that inspires me to continually explore what it means for me to be a Muslim, and specifically what it means for me to be a Black American Muslim. And Dr. Jackson argues that the Islamic tradition itself contains the means to reconcile Blackness, Americanness, and adherence to Islam. So through this event, we hope to share with you and also educate ourselves about a contemporary embodiment of a morally committed, professional, and spiritual leader, our brother El-Hajj Malik El-Shabazz. The Third Res was founded in the fall of 2014, and its officers include myself as the Amira, or president, our Wazir, or vice president, Scott Dooling, the Katiba, or secretary, Khadija Abdullah, and the rest of the leadership includes Ayisha Ibrahim, Aaron Choi, Madiha Gohar, Rahban Zahid, and previous members, Jamil Khan, Hisham Hall, Tasneem O'Day, and the original source for the spirit of this evening, whom you will be hearing from, Zainab Syed. This event was a labor of love, and I would like to thank all of them for their companionship and service. I would also like to thank our advisor, Dean Bilal Ansari. His nurturing support is a source of inspiration, not only for us in the club, but for the entire student body. And I will now introduce Zainab Syed by reading a short poem of hers honoring Malcolm, which is 5 of 8 and can be found on ummawide.com. Bismillah. I see you're human, flesh, filth, breath. I see you're human. I see you are human and beloved to an entire people, to the Lord who brought you into being. The Lord made you human, Malcolm. I feel you're human. Your faults are mine. I'm sorry about that time when I thought you were other than me. Thank you.
Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. Wassalatu wassalamu ala ashraf al-anbiya al-mursaleen, Sayyidina wa Habibina Mawlana Sayyidina Muhammadin wa ala alihi wa sahbihi wa sallam. In the name of Almighty God, the Beneficent, the Merciful, with sending peace and salutations on our beloved Prophet, the Prophet Muhammad, sallallahu alaihi wasallam, we welcome you. We welcome all of you who have come out this evening to this event, and we welcome the over 500 viewers that are participating on the online platform at this time. We welcome you. I am honored to stand before you on this evening for a Zaytuna College Black History Month event, remembering Malcolm. My name is Dawood Yasin, and I am the Dean of Student Life and Experiential Learning at Zaytuna College, and I will direct the evening's events as the program moderator. For some, Malcolm X is a reformed criminal who used education as a means of self-empowerment. To others, Malcolm X is a prominent Black nationalist leader and former spokesman for the Nation of Islam. And to many Muslims, he is a man who embodies the prophetic spirit that selflessly endures for the rights of the oppressed. During his life, each of these characterizations was correct. We find that Malcolm, our brother, was a man that was educated, and that education led him to be prepared. And that education and preparedness made him to carry himself in the highest professional manner, to engage at the highest levels intellectually, and to leave a spiritual legacy that many of us hope that we can follow. In essence, he captures the mission and embodies the mission of our college. In remembering Malcolm, we remember a man who found the language that communicated across the board, from the college professor to the floor sweeper, all at the same time, without demeaning the intellect of either. These are the words of American author John Henrik Clarke. We're remembering a man who was a master, was most meticulous in his use of words. No one knew better than he the power of words. No one knew better than he the power words have over minds of men. This is the American actor Ossie Davis at Malcolm's eulogy. We are remembering a man who raised my consciousness about myself and my people and other people more than any person I know. This is the American singer Lena Horne. We are remembering a man who said about himself, "I only want to be remembered as sincere. And whatever I did or do, even if I made mistakes, they were made in sincerity. If I'm wrong, I am wrong in sincerity. I think the best thing a person can be is sincere." This is our brother Malcolm speaking about himself. For tonight's program, we have 3 distinguished speakers who will share with us the enduring themes of Malcolm's life. First, I will call each speaker to the stage who will share with us their opening remarks. And after their remarks, there will be a few words that I will share with you, and then we will move to a panel discussion after that, and then close out the evening. For our first speaker, who is our own president of Zaytuna College, co-founder of Zaytuna College, Shaykh Hamza Yusuf. He's one of the West's leading proponents of classical learning in Islam and has promoted Islamic sciences and traditional teaching methodologies throughout the world. He's an advisor to Stanford University's program in Islamic Studies and the Center for Islamic Studies at Berkeley's Graduate Theological Union. In addition, he serves as the vice president for the Global Center for Guidance and Renewal, which was founded and is currently presided over by Sheikh Abdullah bin Bayya. Recently, Shaykh Hamza was ranked as the Western world's most influential Islamic scholar by the Muslim 500, edited by John Esposito and Ibrahim Kalen. Shaykh Hamza will speak about Malcolm's insatiable love for learning and explain why he's a critical role model for students of knowledge. Guests, please join me in welcoming Shaykh Hamza Yusuf to the stage.
Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. Wa sallallahu ala Sayyidina Muhammad wa ala alihi wa sahbihi wa sallam tasliman kathira. Wa la hawla wa la quwwata illa billah al-ali al-azim. Alhamdulillah. Thinking about Al-Hajj Malik Shabazz, Malcolm X, thinking about him today, I was thinking about the tradition that the Muslims have of the Tawabin, the repenters. There's a long tradition, it's a literary tradition, there are books written about the great repenters, people that had sinful lives and then they turned those lives around. And that's really at the essence of his story. People, I think, know different things about Malcolm's life, but something that really he constantly drew from was his own experience. And he never abandoned that understanding. Some people will try to hide the past and pretend like it never happened, but he was somebody who embraced the shadow, that he was able to understand what his life was before it was redeemed. And what redeemed his life really was knowledge. And this is where I think it's crucial for us to understand that whenever we see crises anywhere in the world, it's fundamentally and ultimately a crisis of knowledge. And by knowledge, because you have to Allahu Akbar, you have to explain your terms. By knowledge here, I'm not simply talking about information. I'm talking about tahqiq, real knowledge, knowledge that's realized in the heart, a true knowledge. And that true knowledge is what enables people to rectify themselves. If they don't have that true knowledge, then they're not able to rectify themselves. If they can't rectify themselves, they certainly will not rectify the world. And one of the things that one of our poets said, that إِذَا لَمْ يَكُنْ عَنُ اللَّهِ لِلْعَبْدِ, if a servant does not have help from God, أَكْثَرُ مَا يَجْنِي عَلَيْهِ اجْتِهَادُهُ, the thing that will harm him most is his own efforts. And so understanding that we need God and in our lives, we need that guidance. But that guidance has to be with knowledge, because the most heinous crimes are done in the name of God when there's no knowledge. They say evil people can do evil things, but it takes religion to enable good people to do evil things. And there's a lot of truth to that, but it's always religion that is out of ignorance. Looking at his insatiable appetite for knowledge, one of the things that all of us will experience in our lives is we all have appetitive awakenings. A child comes into the world wanting to suckle at the breast. This is really the first awakening, the awakening of the concupiscible soul, the appetitive soul. And then you have the emotional, the irascible soul awakes. The child gets angry. The child begins to experience emotions. But the third awakening is the intellectual awakening. And unfortunately for many people that never happens. It really doesn't. They do not have intellectual awakenings. And by intellectual awakening, I'm not talking about knowledge that you read in books. It's actually what the intellect is, the aql, this illuminated faculty that we have been given from God to understand reality. That awakening is something that has different aspects to it, and one of them is what are called the intelligibles or the ma'qulat, beginning to understand the world and what it means and what's around you. So it took a prison experience for this awakening to occur in Malcolm. When he was a young boy, and he had a good grammar education. What's interesting, he had 8 years, and we have to remember that 8 years, if you studied in the 20s and the 30s, you got grammar. So he learned grammar because they called it grammar school. So he would have known what a noun is, what a verb is, what a subject, what a predicate, a main clause. He would have known these things. And he did very well in school, but he dropped out. He was discouraged from intellectual pursuit and told to pursue carpentry, which was appropriate for his color. He ended up, and people know the story, I'm not going to go into the story, but when he got to prison, there was a man there that really struck him. And Malcolm was foul-mouthed, which is very common in the criminal classes, where every other word is a swear word. He was foul-mouthed, but there was a man there who he affectionately calls Bembi. This man was somebody who never swore, and he was struck by his command of language and the respect that he commanded through language. And one of the things that he told him to do was he should take advantage of the library and the correspondence at the prison while he was there. And this is the beginning of his intellectual awakening. But when he begins to be exposed to the ideas of Elijah Muhammad and the nation, he starts writing letters. And what struck him was his inability to articulate in his letters. He was frustrated by the fact that he didn't have the words, and also his penmanship was poor. But he was sending out these letters he sent them to leaders in the community, he sent them to some of his old hustler friends, and he said he didn't get any replies to these letters, but he was frustrated. But most of all, he was frustrated at his inability to write well to Elijah Muhammad. And so what he did, he said it was the letter writing that wanted him to become better educated. And he says, I became increasingly frustrated at not being able to express what I wanted to convey in letters that I wrote, especially those to Mr. Elijah Muhammad. In the street, I had been the most articulate hustler out there. I had commanded attention when I said something. But now, trying to write simple English, I not only wasn't articulate, I wasn't even functional. How could I sound writing in slang the way I would say it, something such as, look, Daddy, let me pull your coat about a cat, Elijah Muhammad. Many people today and that's quite eloquent in its own, he's got some nice metaphor there, pull your coat, get your attention, right? And then he says, many people today who hear me somewhere in person or on television, or those who read something I've said, will think I went to school far beyond the 8th grade. This impression is due entirely to my prison studies. He then says that every book I picked up had few sentences which didn't contain anywhere from one to nearly all the words that might as well have been in Chinese. So he's trying to read, but he doesn't have the words. And so what does he do? He gets a dictionary. And he begins to copy out the dictionary because he said that he wanted to improve his penmanship so he could write better letters, but he wanted to know the words. What's so stunning about this is that this is what Adam was taught. He was taught the words. It is words that make us human. It's the ability to articulate with words that make us human. And so he set out to learn words, and he wrote that entire dictionary out by hand. And he said it was like an encyclopedia for him. I suppose it was inevitable that as my word base broadened, I could for the first time pick up a book and read and now begin to understand what the book was saying. Anyone who has read a great deal can imagine the new world that opened. Let me tell you something. From then until I left prison, in every free moment I had, if I was not reading in the library, I was reading on my bunk. You couldn't have gotten me out of the books with a wedge. Months passed without even thinking about being imprisoned. In fact, up to then, I had never been so truly free in my life. I mean, that is a stunning statement because his mind was opening up. And this is, the real prison is here. You know, I recently I spoke to some inmates, and one of the things I said to them, you can make Hajj here. And many, many people have done that it's not a valid Hajj in terms of fulfilling your requirements, so don't get me wrong. But there are people that travel to Mecca in their minds, and they experience being there. This is the power of the mind. Khayal, what's called khayal in our tradition. One of the things that he said is that there were Harvard professors and professors from Boston University that were coming in, and this is happening. Chris Hedges, a Harvard graduate, teaches in prison. Cornell West, a Harvard professor, teaches in prison. So there are people from these universities that go into prisons and teach. He was exposed to Harvard professors from Boston University. He said they had inmate debates, and he says, you would be astonished to know how worked up convict debaters and audience would get over subjects like, should babies be fed milk? You see, because this is the intellectual awakening that took place. And he says that there were a sizable number of well-read inmates, especially the popular debaters. Some were said to be practically walking encyclopedias. They were almost celebrities. No university would ask any student to devour literature as I did when this new world opened up to me of being able to read and understand. And that's the key, to read and understand, because we have a whole nation of people that can read but don't necessarily understand. And if you want proof for that, just look at any comments on social media about statements that you just read. And if you understood them, just read down what people have to say, and you'll realize how illiterate our culture is. He said that he read history. He read Will Durant's Story of Civilization, a multi-volume history of the world. He read H.G. Wells' Outline of History. He read Herodotus. He read Arnold Toynbee. And there was a brilliant library that he said would have been the envy of colleges and universities that had been donated to the prison. You can see the divine hand in the education of this man. He said he read philosophy. If you go to Alcatraz and visit Alcatraz, they have a little prison library in there. The books aren't there anymore, but on the wall it says the inmates were particularly interested in philosophy and would check out Kant and other philosophers. He said he read Kant, Schopenhauer, Nietzsche. He was particularly struck by Spinoza. And one of the things that he said, that he felt that Western civilization had ended up in a cul-de-sac. And I don't think it could be summed up any better than that, the crises of Western civilization. But he was once asked, he also got into African American history. He read W.E.B. Du Bois. And he read his about the soul of black folks, and also read Carter Woodson's Negro History. He read a 3-volume book on race and sex and race. He also said that he read Mendel's book on genetics several times, particularly passages from it. And he said the book made clear to him that you could not get a black man from a white man, but you could get a white man from a black man, which substantiated his belief that the first human beings were dark, which according to our tradition, Adam, Udmat al-Ard, Adam is tawny, it means dark, and Hawa means black. So it wouldn't be at all inconsistent with our understanding of the first people, and we now know that they were probably from South Africa. So we're all Africans, right? Tell that to the crackers. You're a mutation. Melatonin deficiency. Some people say that that's part of the problem with the behavior, is it's just a deficiency in He said an Englishman once asked him what his alma mater was. He replied, books. I once asked my Greek grandfather, what his alma mater was, and he said, Hard Knocks. I said, what college do you go to? I was probably like 8 or 9. He said, the College of Hard Knocks. I thought that was a real college. But my grandfather was highly educated, autodidact. Malcolm was an autodidact. He's in a tradition that we have in our own tradition, although our preferred way of teaching is talaqi with a sheikh, and it's definitely the preferred, but there are many great scholars that were actually autodidacts. Ibn Hazm was one of them. One of the greatest Mauritanian scholars, Muhammad Yahya al-Walati, had no teachers. So we do have a tradition, and one of the miracles of the Prophet ﷺ is that he had no human teachers. His teacher was Jibreel ﷺ. In fact, Abdulaziz al-Dabbagh, they once asked him, because he was illiterate, and yet he was incredibly knowledgeable, they asked him, the Prophet ﷺ said that the scholars are the inheritors of prophecy. What did you inherit from the Prophet? And he said his illiteracy. So he was a miracle. Abdulaziz al-Dabbagh was a miracle because he was illiterate and yet he was given all this knowledge. So this is one of it's a karama of the amount of knowledge. But this man was a highly educated man who I would argue that he had a far superior education to many of the PhDs and college graduates. He definitely knew rhetoric. He knew logic. You can clearly see his knowledge of logic is displayed constantly in his argumentation, his pointing out fallacies, logical fallacies. Somebody accused him of being a communist. He said, why would you conclude that? And he said, you spoke at the socialist, at some venue of communists in New York. He said, I spoke at Dr. King's church. Does that make me a follower of Dr. King? He said, I spoke last week at the Methodist church. Does that make me a Methodist? Right? This is logic. So when he said, every time I catch a plane, I have with me a book I want to read, right? And that's a lot of books these days. If I weren't out here every day battling the white man, I could spend the rest of my life reading, just satisfying my curiosity, because you can hardly mention anything I'm not curious about. I don't think anyone got more out of prison than I did. In fact, prison enabled me to study far more intensely than I ever would have if my life had gone differently and I had attended some college. I imagine that one of the biggest troubles, listen up, Zaytuna students, one of the biggest troubles with colleges is there are too many distractions, too much panty raiding, fraternities, and bula bula, and all that. And you have to ask Dr. Mahan what bula bula is, right? Right? Is Dr. Mahan here? Imam Zaid knows what bula bula is. Come on, man. New Haven. Bula bula is like it's the song of the Yaleys when they're going to play Harvard. Like bula bula, right? So too much bula bula, right? There's a lot of bula bula over in Berkeley University right here. But where else but in prison could I attacked my ignorance by being able to study intensely, sometimes as much as 15 hours a day? So this man did not get to the Oxford Union, where I spoke at the Oxford Union. When I walked in, they give you a standing ovation just for getting there. You don't even have to give a talk after that. You just wave or something. Just because you're at the Union, they consider it so prestigious. I mean, this is typical Anglo-Saxon pride. They consider it so prestigious that you've been invited there that you get a standing ovation just for walking in, right? So he was there December 3rd, 1963, a beautiful speech that he gave on extremism. He went toe-to-toe with professors from Oxford. The ovations in that speech were immense. His diction was impeccable. His elocution is beautiful. He did not speak slang. If he spoke slang, it was for rhetorical effect, which is actually a trope in rhetoric, is to use "we was robbed." That's a rhetorical trope that can be used. So Malcolm knew rhetoric, and he used it to great effectiveness. He was an extraordinary orator, but he was an educated mind. And this is what has to be understood. This is not something that came down from heaven like manna. This man struggled with great difficulty to educate himself. And he spent years, he would read till 3 a.m. in prison. He would read with the light of the hall. And every 58 minutes, he would go because the guard would come by, and they weren't allowed to be up at that time, and he would pretend to be asleep. The guard would leave, and he would go back and start reading again. This was Malcolm. So when you see this man, you have to understand that this is not something that just came down. And I would recommend reading the book by Jeff Colvin, Talent is Overrated, because this is a clear argument that has been proven by social science. The talent, this whole idea of these gifted people, all of these gifted people, their great gift is discipline. Their great gift is the ability to struggle against themselves and overcome laziness, overcome the temptations to go the easy way. This is what Malcolm was. He was a highly disciplined individual. He was disciplined morally, he was disciplined intellectually, and he was disciplined spiritually. When his brother Reginald was thrown out, he spent the entire night in prayer. So he was a man of prayer. And these are important things to remember. And finally, in conclusion, it would be difficult to... Malcolm died at 39. It's hard to believe that he was so young when his life was taken away. I mean, that's when the prophets begin, at the age of 40. That's when the intellect really begins to mature, and it reaches its real height, during those years. So we don't know what would have happened, and I'm not going to speculate. But one of the last speeches that he gave, and he stopped using black nationalism in that last period because he was struggling with trying to grapple with what the real problem was. And he recognized that there were whites in Algeria that he met, Berbers that are white that he met, that said they didn't resonate with that word, black nationalism. So he was struggling in himself to find something. But he was asked 1 month before he was killed, what do you think is responsible for race prejudice in the U.S.? And Malcolm said, ignorance and greed, and a skillfully designed program of miseducation that goes right along with the American system of exploitation and oppression. So it takes education to eliminate it. And just because you have colleges and universities does not mean you have education. The colleges and universities in the American educational system are skillfully used to miseducate. I couldn't put it better. Thank you.
MashaAllah. Always a pleasure, Shaykh Hamza. Next, please join me in welcoming our second guest and speaker, the Reverend Curtis Flemming Sr. Pastor Curtis Flemming is a native of New York City and is a third-generation Christian pastor who has experienced the complexities of life and faith as an African-American male. He has organized churches in the inner city of Connecticut, New Jersey, and Oakland, California, as well as led a 158-year-old multicultural, multi-ethnic congregation in his hometown. He presently serves as the Bay Area Director of World Impact and Ministry and serves as Senior Pastor of Bay Community Fellowship in West Oakland. He holds a Master of Divinity from Alliance Theological Seminary in New York and is a doctoral candidate of ministry at Northeastern Seminary in Rochester, New York. It has always been his desire to serve in areas of great need and help make the community livable once again. Ladies and gentlemen, join me in welcoming the Reverend Curtis Flemming Sr.
I am indeed honored to be here tonight and to sit and stand before you and the esteemed guests who are speaking to us tonight about the life of one of the greatest individuals to live in the 20th century. I'm a little older now, so some of the things that I've learned from life shapes me differently than when I was younger. My experiences have somewhat followed the trajectory of Malik Shabazz or Malcolm X. I myself found injustice very hard to stomach. When I think about Malcolm, I think about, in my tradition, the story of Abraham, whom God called to be a blessing to all the families of the earth. And I see Malcolm as one of those individuals who were sent by God to bring humanity, all the families of the earth, back on track with God's plan for all of us, which is, in your experience, Ummah, or that great community. The task of Malcolm was not received well at the time that he was assigned that task. And he had great difficulties, as all prophets do, bringing a lot of people around to realizing that this was a move of God. Those of us who come from different faith traditions, we sometimes find it hard to see God in others. I told someone lately that I think the movement of Black Lives Matter and the movement against injustice in this country in this very time and in this very day it might just be a move of God. It might be a prophetic move of God, because ultimately, who are we as human beings to dictate to whom God speaks and to whom God moves through? So Malcolm, in his life, basically, you can look at Malcolm's life in three distinct periods. You have Malcolm as a black Muslim, the young man who was angry because of the injustices that he experienced in his own life, and the incarceration and the hopelessness of being a black man in a time where being black wasn't that popular. Very familiar in my experience to this day. You have Malcolm in the time of transition, where he is now experiencing a bigger community, where he's being educated by life and life experiences, not just the theology or the traditions that he was taught by the Honorable Prophet Elijah Muhammad. You find Malcolm in his final days, where he is at the fullest of his potentiality, where his experience have been shaped by life and his openness now to the greatest struggle of all humanity, where God is trying to bring people who are, according to my tradition, made in his image, children of one Father. Malcolm is now trying to ally himself with others who are seeking the good. And I think the lesson that we can learn about Malcolm is that we can see that there's a natural progression of knowledge. There's a natural progression. Our knowledge in our lives cannot be stagnant. And we use knowledge in training and learning, but knowledge that's not applied with wisdom is just knowledge. Wisdom of life, wisdom of things you experience in life that shapes you, wisdom of the other's story, of other human beings, and what you learn when you are embracing other cultures and you're embracing other thoughts, when you challenge your thoughts and your preconceived notions in the open market of ideas. Malcolm was an angry black man because a system created him. And they allowed that one particular expression of anger, but he grew beyond that. Certainly it was his faith, his system of faith that he received in the black Muslim religion that certainly shaped him and gave him direction. But it was his anger that caused him to lash out and to look for something other than just being a coward and giving his life over to so many of the devices that will occupy us until we die. He could have took the route of many of the blacks in that community at that time, drugs, alcohol, but he was shaped by his encounter with faith. Now, it's interesting, we live in a time where faith is not that popular. It's amazing that we we are so intelligent, so smart, that where the majority of human existence, we had a system of transcendence. We had faith in something, and now we live in a time where faith is somewhat not popular. I prefer to go with the weight of human history, where humanity always understood that there was a higher call and there's a higher purpose, and yes, there's a higher being. And we should be a people who not only are shaped by our present circumstances, but by our higher faith. So Malcolm, in the three particular portions of his life, and the one that I'm concerned with is his transition in his final days in life. In his final days in life, he was asked the question, will you affiliate with certain people? Will you affiliate with the socialists? Will you affiliate with the communists? Will you affiliate with other particular groups that's not like yourself? Will you even affiliate with people, as my esteemed colleague said, whose melanin content is not evident. And I do think there's some research that says that melanin does have a calming effect on the human being. So maybe that's why I hope it doesn't calm us down too much where we never on time, but but Malcolm responded, he says, if I'm in a cave with a wolf and there's someone outside the cage that can let me out, I'm not going to be particularly concerned with who's outside that can let me out. So his progression of thought about partnership or strategic allies changed because he progressed in knowledge and he progressed in awareness. When I was a young man growing up in one particular segment of the population, my progression of thought was basically what was around me. When I got exposed to more, I learned more. And I was able to think about what I held as true, what I held as dare, versus the wider realm of knowledge that's out there. So Malcolm decided that he would partner with anybody who was looking out for the common good of the community. A lot of times, though, it seems as if people only want to remember our past. They never want to remember the totality of our life's achievements, but we have a tendency to look at the negative elemental sides of our past. We have a saying in our particular ethnicity that it's like crabs in a bushel. Back east, you can buy the little small crabs, and they come in a bushel, blue crabs. And the blue crabs, they put them in the bushel, but you never really have to put a top on the bushel, because if one crab gets too close to climb out to the rim, to the top, you can be sure that another crab will pull him back down. And this seems to be the way that those who hold power try to picture Malcolm in most cases. They try to picture him based upon the angry black man who society have relegated to a place where our hate, and whether it's righteous or not, I still have to fight myself, the feelings that I have in myself by how I was treated as a youth. But they try to put him there, and they recognize that aspect of his life, but they never really see the progression, nor do they want to talk about the progression. And if we are ever going to be a people who bring about change, and the people whom, in my tradition, wants to bring about this great community, and I believe that we are all human. In most of our faith traditions, we all declare and claim some type of descent from Abraham. We as Christians claim it by faith, that he trusted God's will and judgment on his life. And he moved out into a land that he didn't know, because God promised that he was not only going to be a blessing to himself, but he declared that you're going to be a blessing to all, and note the word, families of the earth. And I dare say we're all related. And we're all family. And if we're going to progress to that great ummah, that great community, it can't be because I think I have all knowledge and I have put God in a box and I know him ontologically and I know him completely. The hubris of humanity to think that we need to argue and fight for God instead of doing what seemed to be very obvious, is to love one another and take care of one another despite our differences. The Imam that will be speaking after me is from Boston. I'm from New York. I can't figure out why in the world anybody would be a Boston Red Sox fan. It seems obvious to me that you should be a New York Yankees fan. And even though I feign allegiance to the Oakland A's, but in my heart, I'm still Orthodox New York Yankees. But we still must find a way as human beings, to partner for the good of all humanity. I would hate to stand in front of the Lord, our God, the maker of all humanity, and have to give account for why I never progressed to think that the basic religious duty that I could do was to love one another. So Malcolm moved to this position. And he recognized that it's better for us to ally ourselves. And we can't necessarily expect everybody to believe the same. But it's better to ally ourselves for the greater good than to stay separate and die as fools. So on my car, I have a picture of Malcolm and Martin, and I just didn't purchase it today. In fact, it was given to me because my demeanor is such that it depends on the situation. You can get either Malcolm or you can get Martin. And I'm not ashamed to say that. I mean, there may be some pushback in other areas, but I don't see when one have a sincere desire for the improvement of his own people and then the ultimate improvement of all people. But charity has to start somewhere. And we have a saying that charity begins where? At home. So any people who is not concerned about the immediate progress of their own people, as we are celebrating, we were remembering, and I thank you, and it's so gracious of you to remember Black History Month, because most people try to just glaze over or gloss over our impact in the world. I had a fellow tell me one day, well, what did black folks ever do? Well, one thing we did that you didn't do, we read. So, maybe if you read a little bit more, you'll know, right? But we as individuals need to be concerned about what's going on in our own community. But we also need to have a broader view about what's going on in other communities. And I think his trips, when he made the Hajj, and he saw the differences, the beauty of humankind in the various different shades and hues and ethnicities and cultures, and when he went there, he saw for the first time, he saw a community that was not represented here in American Christianity. He learned that it's better to not only have a theological position, but have a position that's shaped by your life experiences in the broader sense. And he came to that recognition. So if I was to give us a quick view on what we should do going forward and how we should ally ourselves, are the individuals that we're partnering with, are they working for the greater good of humanity? I think God would be pleased. In whatever, and I'm glad I'm around people of faith, and however you call him, and however you pray to him, I believe he would be pleased if we were known as the people who made community livable and possible. And we can ally ourselves. And I'm sitting next to a Bostonian. Sacrilege. But if he is at the gate of the cage, and he's going to release me and release humanity from being devoured by the wolves of individuals and systems that want to oppress and maintain the status quo, I will say to him, my brother, here's my right hand. And may peace be upon you. As I pray, peace will be upon me. Thank you.
Thank you, Reverend Flemming. Our final speaker of the evening is no stranger to our community. He is the second of three co-founders, a senior faculty member at Zaytuna College. His work, or he brings a sensitivity about race and poverty issues and scholarly discipline to his faith-based work. As a gifted author and lecturer, he too was ranked as one of the world's most influential scholars in Islam by the 500 most influential Muslims, edited by John Esposito and Ibrahim Callan. He has also authored numerous articles, and his works, his books that he has written, Heirs of the Prophets in 2002, Scattered Pictures, Reflections of an American Muslim in 2005, and his award-winning text, Treatise for Seekers of Guidance in 2008. I could go on and on and on about a man that I share a unique history with. I'll just share something with you anecdotally, that my journey to this faith began by reading the autobiography of Malcolm X. At the time that I was reading that autobiography, I had a professor in 1989 whose name was Zaid Shakir. I was not Muslim at that time, and I was a student of his in a political science class, Islam and Revolution. If that's not serendipity, then I don't know what it is. So brothers and sisters, esteemed guests, please join me in welcoming Imam Zaid Shakir.
Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim, alhamdulillah rabbil alameen. والصلاة والسلام على سيد المرسلين سيدنا محمد وعلى آله وصحبه وسلم تسليما كثيرا. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Honored guests, brothers and sisters, ladies and gentlemen, welcome. And it really is a tremendous honor to be here. But before I do anything, I just have to remind our dear Reverend Fletcher and our dear Imam Ibrahim that between New York and Boston, there's this place called Connecticut. And we're in the house. We're in the house. Yasin is here, Bilal is here, Dr. Colleen is here, Mahan should be here. My wife is here from Connecticut. But we also have a young lady here. We'd be remiss if we didn't acknowledge her, but our sister Zainab, Syed is here from Coventry, Connecticut, detouring down the streets of North Hartford. If you ever want to go to a scary place, don't go to East Oakland, go to North Hartford. So Reverend Fletcher, huh? Flemming, I'm sorry, Flemming. Go to North Hartford, Weaver High School. We used to play them. Let me tell you what happened. I'm from New Britain, Connecticut. We played Weaver High School. When you beat Weaver in basketball, man, they would brick your bus. They beat up your team. So this is a true story. The Capital District Conference, that was our conference, banned spectators from Weaver High School home basketball games. That's how rough. And so Zainab was there, so she's going to share a bit of poetry. I'm donating my time. I yield my time to the sister from Connecticut. Bismillah.
Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. Assalamu alaikum. Peace be with you. Good evening. Thank you, Imam Zaid. I was a freshman at Zaytuna College this year, and when I applied to Zaytuna, my personal statement was about Malcolm X. And Imam Zaid Shakir interviewed me, and the entire interview was about Malcolm X. And now, I was given the opportunity to work with my classmates and put this event together, which is about Malcolm X. God has blessed me and given me a lot of success, but Malcolm has been the means. And if I'm going to share something, I want to share with you guys what I intended when we decided to organize this event. Bismillah. So I wish to share with you all the intention behind this event. As many of you know, this month marks 50 years since the martyrdom of Malcolm X. The first time I got to know Malcolm was in 8th grade when I discovered his autobiography. Ever since, I've considered him my primary teacher. I felt it was important to create a space where we all come together and remember him, hence the name of our event tonight, Remembering Malcolm. But what does it really mean to remember Malcolm? It is not to merely remember a single stage of his life, which many of us tend to do. Each person or group of people claim the part of Malcolm's life that is the most comfortable for them. And my Muslim brothers and sisters, for us, this sometimes means only the last year of his life after Malcolm's pilgrimage to Mecca. But tonight, I wish for all of us to move beyond this. Tonight, we have not gathered here to only remember Detroit Red, or to only remember Minister Malcolm X, or to only remember Al-Hajj Malik al-Shabazz. I intend to remember all of Malcolm, and I invite you all to do the same. I sat in a coffee shop in Oakland earlier today, reading through Malcolm's 1965 interview with Claude Lewis. I was reminded that we must recognize the beauty of Malcolm's life in its entirety when I read his answer to being asked how he wants to be remembered. You all heard this quote earlier. Imam Dawood Yasin shared it, and I will share it again. His answer to how he wanted to be remembered was, sincere in whatever I did or do, even if I make mistakes. They were made in sincerity. If I am wrong, I'm wrong in sincerity. I think that is the best a person can be. He can be wrong, but if he is sincere, you can put up with him. So I think it is safe to say that to remember all of Malcolm is to humanize him. It is to see his faults, which he never cared to hide anyway, and to know that each of his actions were driven from a place of sincerity. For sincerity is what he was given by God, and sincerity is what he delivered to all of his people, whom he loved so dearly. So thank you all for coming out tonight. Thank you, Ramzan.
Alhamdulillah. A final note on this New York-Boston thing. This is how we do the Red Sox and the Yankees when you're in Connecticut. When the Yankees are winning, you're a Yankee fan. When the Red Sox are winning, you're a Red Sox fan. And that's how we do it. Alhamdulillah. But in fairness to Boston and New York, as we all know, Malcolm spent time in Boston and Malcolm spent time in New York. But going back and forth, he had to pass through Connecticut. I commend our students for wanting to talk about Malcolm, to have the courage to want to talk about Malcolm, because a lot of people don't want to talk about Malcolm. A lot of people don't want to just say that this is the 50 years have passed since his assassination. A lot of people don't want to be associated with commemorating Malcolm's life in any way. And the tragedy of that is because we have avoided, so many people rather, not we necessarily, certainly not we in here, but so many people in this country have avoided having hard conversations around what Malcolm was talking about in terms of race relations, in terms of oppression, in terms of American empire, in terms of historical realities that are unpleasant, and we just try to sweep under the rug. Because we have avoided those conversations, much, if not most, of what Malcolm was talking about is still relevant today, 50 years later. That is a national tragedy, brothers and sisters. We need to make sure 50 years from now, our grandchildren are not standing here, or great-grandchildren, whatever the case would be, talking about how relevant what Malcolm was talking about 100 years ago still is. We have work to do, and we're not going to get about that work by failing to acknowledge the nature of it, the difficulty of it, nor what it's going to demand from us to get on with it. Malcolm had the courage to get on with it in his lifetime, in his time, and his place. Spiritually, and this is what I was asked to talk about, and the time is short. We need to get on to the panel. So I wanted to talk about his growth and his evolution as a spiritual being, where he started and where he ended up. But I also wanted to talk about the issue of identity and religion. Malcolm was identified, as was mentioned earlier, black nationalist, freedom fighter, Muslim, American, African American, or as he would say, Afro-American, and many different other ways. And some of that he would accept, some of that he would outgrow. But the important thing to note is that as a human being, as a religious being, he did not see these various aspects of his identity as being mutually exclusive, as being somehow contradictory. In fact, one gave birth to or reinforced the other. Lewis D. Carroll Jr., if you're going to read a book about Malcolm, read Lewis D. Carroll Jr.'s work. It's called A Religious Life of Malcolm X. That's the second half of the title. What's the first half? On the side of my people. And so Malcolm's religiosity, if you will, did not prevent him from being on the side of his people. Allah Ta'ala mentions in the Quran, Ya ayyuhan nas, O humanity, inna khalaqnakum min dhakarin wa untha, we made you from a male and female. وَجَعَلْنَاكُمْ شُعُوبًا وَقَبَائِلَ لِتَعَارَفُوا, and we made you into nations and tribes. When the revelation came down, وَإِن تَتَوَلَّوْا يَسْتَبْدِلْ قَوْمًا غَيْرَكُمْ ثُمَّ لَا يَكُونُوا أَمْثَالَكُمْ. If you turn back, then Allah will bring another people, they won't be like you. And it's related that the Prophet ﷺ, he put his hand on the shoulder of Salman al-Farisi, Salman the Persian, and he said, Huwa wa qawmuhu, him and his people. He said, Al-adhan lil-habasha, the adhan is for the people of Ethiopia. Al-iman, Yamani, wal-hikmatu Yamaniya, faith and wisdom are Yemeni in character. He identified nations, and these nations were under God. Nations under God. Their national identity was not something that negated their religious identity. And their religious identity isn't something that negated their national identity. And Malcolm showed how you can be a balanced human being when you embrace all of the aspects of what goes into making you who you are. And this is very important for us to be balanced religious creatures, if you will. Because extremism comes when we say we're just a Muslim. Because why? Where does the extremism come from? There are other aspects of who we are. There are other aspects of our being that create needs. And when these needs aren't met, when the need for family isn't met, as it's not, people are being raised in slums. Their fathers are halfway around the world working in an oil field or in some European country. Their mothers are struggling to keep up with very little money that trickles back. And so the sense of family isn't there. Family is very important. The Prophet ﷺ, when we sing his praises, one of the way we do that, Salatullah ala nabi al-hashimi muttalibi. We celebrate his family, the prayers of Allah upon the Prophet, who is a Hashimi, who is a Muttalibi. He's a member of a tribe, he's a member of a family. When there is no tribe, when there is no family, when all we know are voids and vacuums, and then some demagogue comes and fills those voids with twisted representations of religion, there's no family, there's no tribe, there's no sense of belonging. To balance that out, that's where extremism comes from. And that's a lot of what we're seeing in our world today. So if Malcolm represents anything as a religious person, he represents balance. And part of that balance is being on the side of his people. Being on the side of his people. And we have to be, if we're religious beings, we have to be on the side of our people. And that can mean many things. It can mean on the side of the African American people, on the side of the Spanish-speaking people, or people from Spanish-speaking origins and backgrounds, on the side of the Pakistani people. But in this country, it also means being on the side of the American people. And what did that mean for Malcolm? It meant dedicating his life to saving his people. And at the end, he just wasn't trying to save African Americans. He was trying to save all of Americans. He was trying to save America from descending into a race war. He was trying to save America from being a nation that's forever shackled to the deep racial tensions that has defined this country as a nation. And it's ironic that the person who said, and if we quote Malcolm, the person who said, true Islam has shown me that a blanket indictment of white people is as wrong as when whites make blanket indictments against blacks. It's ironic that the person who said that was the person who perhaps more than anyone else, even more than Elijah Muhammad, popularized the slogan, the white man is the devil. But Malcolm grew and he evolved. And he came to say that blanket indictments have nothing to do with Islam. They're wrong. That we have to, America needs to understand Islam because this is the one religion that erases from its society the race problem. And then, yes, there are problems. He's generalizing. And as Shaykh Hamza pointed out very eloquently, he was a very intelligent person. So if he made a statement like that, it isn't, as some of his critics say, he was enamored, he was deceived, he was fantasizing about Islam. Look at the racism in Muslim societies. No, Malcolm was looking deeper than the surface. And if you want to understand the veracity of what he was saying, the truthfulness of what he was saying, consider that none other than the great historian whom Malcolm read, Arnold Toynbee, said exactly the same thing. That one of the things Islam can offer Western civilization as something that could possibly contribute to staving off its self-destruction is a solution to the race problem. And it's a tragedy that Islam is now being used to rekindle the racist attitudes of the past. And that's what all this Islamophobia stuff is all about. When you go look at the racial composition of the people saying, kill the Muslims, and look at the racial composition of the Muslims, and look at the way the anti-Muslim slogans are being used to rally people towards what? Towards preserving what? Towards retrieving what? It's not religious. May Allah Ta'ala help us. In conclusion, as Reverend Flemming mentioned, religion ultimately is about love. Religion's about love. Allah, we're reminded our Prophet ﷺ, we just very briefly mentioned the beginning of 2 hadith. One, prophetic traditions. One, he says, لَن تُؤْمِنُوا حَتَّى تَحَبُّوا. You will not truly believe until you love one another. And the other, and then there's another part about mercy. Another says, لَا تَدْخُلُونَ الْجَنَّةَ حَتَّى تَحَبُّوا. You will not enter paradise until you love one another. True belief, a condition for entering paradise, a love, mutual love. This is what Malcolm said about love. This isn't quoted often, but I verified it. We need more light about each other. Light creates understanding. Understanding creates love. Love creates patience, and patience creates unity. We need more love as a foundation for our unity. This is what religion is all about. It's not about hate. It's about love. Our Prophet ﷺ, he taught us to love. He taught us to love. And people like Malcolm were inspired by his example. And we don't have time to go into Malcolm's pursuit of specific religious knowledge of Islam. But it was a deep pursuit. It was a pursuit reflective of who he was. So there's much to say, but it would be better to say it in conversation. So I'm going to stop here. May Allah Ta'ala, Almighty God, bless everybody. May He bless us to love. May He bless us to be patient with each other. May He bless us to love each other. May He bless us to have light in our lives. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullah.
MashaAllah, thank you, Imam Zaid and our panelists. So now we're going to turn to our panel discussion. However, before we begin with our speakers, I want to take a quick minute and make a request. As most of you know, that Zaytuna College is entirely funded through the generosity of individual donors, such as you in the audience tonight and those that are online from our Muslim American community. And it is this generosity that has helped to build this college and also pays for the tuition and housing of our students and costs that are associated with that. And it is through this generosity that allows us to put together programs like this to benefit our community. So tonight we invite all of you that are here in this room, and as well as those who are online, to join our 12,000 Strong campaign. It's a special group of the most committed donors of this college. This program was inspired by a prophetic tradition that says that 12,000 Muslims will not be defeated for their lack of numbers. So we ask you to join by committing a monthly donation of any amount that you feel you can afford. Those that are in this room, you can simply fill out a pledge card and hand it to volunteers. And those of you that are online, you should have a website address displayed where you can make a possible donation, which will allow us to have more programs such as this. So that's the end of my appeal. And now I'd like to invite our three speakers to join me on stage for discussion and for audience questions. As our panelists take their seats, we will be accepting questions on index cards. So please write your questions on index cards. They'll be handed forward. If you'd like to and you feel comfortable, please write your name on it. We'll mention that. And also, if there is a question that you would like to have directed specifically at one of the panelists, please do that as well. So please join me in welcoming this part of our program in the panel discussion. So our first question I would like to ask Shaykh Hamza. You mentioned that Malcolm said, "I attacked my ignorance." Can you share what is, in your opinion, the sources of disconnect that prevent us from embracing this aspect of Malcolm's legacy?
Well, first of all, I think hit one of the things that makes a person docile, which originally meant able to be educated, is that you have to submit. And the first thing that he said, it was the most hardest things, was just to get on his knees and admit that he was wrong and really ask forgiveness. And he really struggled with that. And he took pride in kind of being this character that presented himself as like an evil person. But the other thing is that he was aware of his ignorance, which unfortunately a lot of us are not aware of our ignorance. And you know, the Muslims call that simple ignorance. And they consider it to be educable, that if you have somebody who knows he's ignorant, you can teach them. But if they're ignorant and they don't know they're ignorant, then you can't teach them. So just admitting his ignorance was really important. And then finally, the other thing, that I don't think people understand how much he studied. You know, we have so many activists out there that don't do the work, that prepare them spiritually and intellectually to be activists. He was prepared. When he went in, he was on the prison debating team. You know, he was debating with some really serious. He had a Harvard seminarian that he debated about Jesus being black. And he finally said, at least he admitted that he was brown. Like he accepted that compromise. But he said he never met an intelligent minister that could claim that Jesus was white. You know, but he was prepared. And when I saw his Quran at the Schoenberg Center, I was just floored because it was so referenced. He had all through, every single page had notes on it, but it also had ayah references of other ayahs that relate to that ayah. He really studied the Quran. I mean, he knew the Quran very deeply. So I think people have to recognize that he really was an incredible student of knowledge, and that study never stopped. He was always evolving intellectually and spiritually.
My next question is for Reverend Flemming. Thank you, Shaykh Hamza. My next question is for Reverend Flemming. In the eulogy that I referenced, and Ossie Davis spoke about Brother Malcolm, he said, "What we place in the ground is no more now a man, but a seed, which after the winter of our discontent will come forth again to meet us." You work, minister, and organize in Oakland. How do you see Malcolm's vision in what's happening today with the national Black Lives Matter movement?
I think it's very hard to try to suppress truth for any significant length of time. Truth have uncanny ability to sprout and grow, or to germinate and grow and produce fruit. So what you see now is a natural human discontent of injustice, because I believe that the seed of truth is in our conscience. I think we are created with that, and that's something that's birthed into us. And so Malcolm in his life struggle, being really one of the premier examples of our individual experience as Black people, and then other individual experience as people of faith, give catalysts. I think this movement is catalyst, and I think what we're seeing now is that we're just seeing the fruit of truth, that it's not okay for systemic wickedness and evil to be prevalent. It's not okay to isolate one individual group of people or segment of population behind their either their ethnicity or their religion or their immigration status. These things are not okay, and truth is just sprouting again, and its fruit is being seen in this prophetic move of individuals, which is kind of different in America, individuals of all different types of, all different persuasions and all different backgrounds. So it says something about the ultimate reality of truth. So I think Malcolm's story and legacy is as relevant now as it was then, but now people have become more aware, and the ground is fertile, and the fruit is produced.
Thank you. We have our first question from the audience. It is directed to Shaykh Hamza. The question is, how can the Islamic tradition help us address the contemporary problem of color blindness that makes the power of whiteness in perpetuating racial inequality?
Well, you know, there's a really interesting book that Michelle Alexander wrote called The New Jim Crow, which is about race in the age of what she calls color blindness. This idea somehow that we're over the race issue with the Obama America. And the reality of it is when you actually study the numbers and look at the reality on the ground, it's actually, it's so much worse than it was when Malcolm was dealing with these problems. And while it shouldn't be cause for despair, I mean, we can't, it would be unfair to all those people that survived the transatlantic, those people that had the courage to stay alive. And the only thing that kept them alive, because some of them jumped over and committed suicide and some people lost that. But the only thing that kept them alive was hope, that this too will pass. And so it's really important to us to see how serious this problem is when you're looking at these inner cities, because the devastation of the black church was so important in the African American community at keeping a togetherness in the community. And some of the most beautiful people I've met in this country are people out of the black church. In the South, Imam Zaid and I were at a conference, and there was a group there was actually a conference of a black church, and they just had such impeccable manners and civility and dignity, and those qualities that were very important in the African American community that have really been devastated in the inner cities, and that loss. And I think the whole liberal approach to this problem is so much deeper. The only thing, it's not government's not going to solve any of these problems. Religion is the only thing that can solve this problem. I really believe that, because the family has to be reestablished. And the only thing that will reestablish the family is religion. And the last point about this is that when you look at the people that are privileged by class, and I think this thing is much more about class and wealth, because there are many, the white people that are in the caboose of the train and that are given this lie about being part of this culture that has devastated the middle class, because you're seeing increasingly white people, and as they get marginalized in their ignorance, the race issue becomes more and more a problem. That's right?
Yeah. I think that's why, as religious people, we have to take the lead in doing everything in our power from preventing that from happening. Because it's not happening, it's happening now when human beings have nuclear bombs It's happening now when human beings have the ability to just wreak so much havoc and destruction on each other that if we don't get to a place of negating the ability for people to play off each other on the basis of race, which has been a historical reality here in this country, on the basis of just culture, the culture wars, on the basis of these marginal issues that really have no substance, then it's going to be a very, very scary place to be in, and especially for our children. So I think we have a lot of work to do, and it's going to take people of faith, because faith, and this is something about Malcolm. Malcolm was humble. Faith breeds humility. When there's no God, then there's no recognition of a power greater than you, then you become that ultimate power. And that egoism and egomaniacalism, or however you would pronounce it, everyone being an egomaniac, doesn't augur well for a harmonious future.
Imam Zaid, Reverend Flemming, did you have something?
Yeah, I agree. I think you're not going to find a solution to the problems of humanity by any particular political party or any particular group of people who are more interested in immediate gain than those who have a sense of transcendence and those who have a sense of moral obligation. I heard someone say that we need to have an understanding that injustice and vengeance will be dealt with by God ultimately in order for us to become a people of peace. If we continue to try to settle and resolve our own individual grievances, it's somewhat like my 5-year-old and 7-year-old sons. It just doesn't seem to ever happen, and it just always seems to be conflict. But only people of faith, and I am absolutely assured to that from everything I've seen and studied and looked upon in human history, only people of faith can have an impact and really bring about that community of peace-loving people. One quick note, I heard the story of a philosopher and academic and corporate guy climbing the mountain of truth, and when they got up there, they found the religious scholars and people of faith sitting there saying, "What took you so long to get here?" And I think that there are small t truths, the small lowercase t truths, and I think that there is capital or big T, uppercase truth, and the uppercase truth is based upon our relationship to the one who's ultimately able to proclaim that truth. And for me, that's God.
Imam Zaid, I'd like to, just kind of following on that question right here, Shaykh Hamza, you mentioned in the book, The New Jim Crow, that so much is worse on the ground right now, than when Malcolm was on the ground, Imam Zaid. So can you speak just a little bit and elaborate on the spiritual response to these challenges? I know we had a conversation one day about a word that the Reverend used, of transcendency, that ultimately we are not even thinking about this realm, but one has to be focused beyond this realm. Can you speak about that? Because I don't think really there is something outside of that could have motivated and kept Malcolm going in what he was facing in that time.
Definitely. I think number one is not being consumed by our fears. And that is something that religion has helped to give people. I think the Christians, if I misquote it, you can bop me with your microphone.
I'm Christian, I don't bop.
Yeah, well, you can do a symbolic bop. You can do like that. Yea, though I walk through the valley of the shadow of death, I will fear no evil, for thine art with me, thy rod and thy staff, they comfort me. I will fear no evil. Yeah. And Muslims were told, إِنَّمَا ذَلِكُمُ الشَّيْطَانُ يُخَوِّفُ أَوْلِيَاءَهُ فَلَا تَخَافُوهُمْ وَخَافُونِي إِن كُنتُم مُؤْمِنِينَ. That's Satan. He inspires the fear of his dupes in you. Fear them not. Fear me if indeed you are believers. And so one of the ways that these various categories and distinctions and differences between people are used, they're used to stir up fear. Like, these people are a threat. These people are going to take what you have. They're going to take your privileged position. And so we become afraid of them. So I think we have to work through our fears. We have to truly be fearless individuals. And we have to believe that if we don't get it, so if we don't get the justice that we feel is ours in this world, we believe that ultimate justice comes after this world. And so we can relax. And when we relax, everything doesn't become a zero-sum game. Just everything that I win is your total loss. Everything that you might win is my total loss. And so there's no room to just relax and say, you know what, just take it. Just take it. Because I'll get mine sooner or later.
Shaykh Hamza, there's a question here to you. There is still a prevalent perception of Malcolm as a teacher of violent hate. How do we break this perception among Muslims and non-Muslims?
Well, my take on it, Mike Wallace, who really appreciated Malcolm, and Mike Wallace actually argued that Malcolm invented the soundbite, which is pretty interesting. He said he had a media savvy that was really incredible. But he had a famous program where Malcolm was really exposed to the wider audience, which was called The Hate That Hate Produced. And I think that title is an apt title, that, the African-American experience was so devastating. These are people that had just fought, the war. And Jackie Robinson, who was educated at UCLA, was an incredible, athlete. He was an officer that was actually got dishonorably discharged because he refused to go to the back of this military vehicle, because he was African American. So people don't realize that, I was born into an apartheid country. When I was born, we had Jim Crow laws in the South. It's hard to believe. It's not that long ago. And so a lot of people, these young people don't realize the amount of struggle. And then you talk about the union struggles. There's so many struggles that this country has been through. And now we're in this kind of narcissistic culture of entitlement where so many of these, young people out there have no sense of struggle and sacrifice. And that this is what it takes. It takes going out and really making the changes that are necessary. So, I think it's just really important for us to recognize that a lot of that was a reaction to their experience. And we can't deny that experience. To deny it is I think, just to deny reality. But Malcolm said something which, I think in many ways he was just inspired, but he said something that echoed a prophetic hadith, that you used to hate white people so much, and after Mecca, now how he said, I never hated anybody to an extreme, which is a hadith. أحبب حبيبك هونا ما وأبغض بغيضك هونا ما عسى أن يكون حبيبك يوما ما. Don't hate anybody to an extreme because he may become somebody you love eventually, which is a hadith in Tirmidhi. So that, that was, I think that's the reality. His nature was not hateful. I really believe that at the root of his nature was a lot of love, but his experiences in life were very intense. His father was probably murdered. His mother was in horrific conditions and lost her children, when he was, I think, 13. And so he really just had horrible experiences. Martin Luther King came from a very privileged background within the African American community. He had a very different experience. He had a loving family. His father was a well-established minister. He suffered also just because he grew up in that world. But it was a very different experience, a much more wholesome experience for developing somebody. So I think Malcolm, to me, his evolution is an incredible evolution and a testimony to the inherent goodness of the man.
And just in what you're saying, again, just quoting Ozzie Davis, the eulogy he makes is just so beautiful. He said, "Did you ever talk to Brother Malcolm? Did you ever touch him or have him smile at you? Did you ever really listen to him? Did he ever do a mean thing? Was he ever himself associated with violence or any public disturbance? For if you did, you would know him. And if you knew him, you would know why we must honor him."
I think one thing that made people uncomfortable with Malcolm was the intensity of his love for his people. And so he was trying to protect, nurture, and improve the lot of his people. And in doing that, sometimes he was a bit aggressive. It's like if you're climbing a tree and you don't see the bird nest, and you put your hand up there, especially if it's a blue jay, your hand's gonna get attacked. And so it's not that the blue jay hates you. She loves her babies. She doesn't want you crushing the eggs before they've even had a chance to come into the world and to develop. So Malcolm had an intense love for his people. I think DeCarroll really captures that, on the side of my people. And in trying to nurture, to defend, to encourage, his protectiveness was sometimes very aggressive. But he said himself, I don't hate anybody. I don't hate anybody.
Reverend?
But I love my people.
Yeah, and I guess the question really deals with the fact, do you have the right to protect yourself as a people, as an individual? I think most of our faith traditions will definitely show where God have given permission for people to protect themselves. I think that the difference will be if you're taking individual vengeance or taking individual action, or you take an action as a leader of a particular people or as a government representative of a particular people. This is a question that's very problematic, because if you read the Bible, you will see that there were certainly times where the people of the book, they protected themselves. And so where do we stand? What's the dichotomy between being the people who love peace and the people who ultimately have to say that my life matters? And I have children who I want to help raise. And one of the particular problems we have in our community right now is that we live in a fatherless generation. Who's protecting my daughters, and who's protecting my sons, and who's modeling the behavior that I want to see? And if I have a systemic oppression and evil that wants to decimate the future generation, do I have a right ordained by God to protect myself?
Also, with the war on drugs that's happened, you're dealing with the Fourth Amendment's pretty much been thrown out in certain segments of our society, where search and seizure laws that were actually pretty strongly upheld. It was difficult to get warrants and things like that just to go in. But, you had to have probable cause. I mean, the Fourth Amendment says, you have to have people that swear.
There was a Fourth Amendment?
No.
Oh, I'm sorry, because in my particular people group, we never experienced the Fourth Amendment.
So. But
I understand.
Yeah, but that's the reality of the war on drugs that has, had taken a prison population from about 350,000 people to over 2 million people, since 1980. So you're just dealing, these are realities. People, and Henry Sweet's a good example of, he was defending his house from a white mob in Detroit in 1927 and killed a white man. Clarence Darrow got him off with an all-white jury by simply pointing out to them that if this was a white man, he would not be on trial right now. And he was convincing enough. He had a 6-hour closing argument, but he was convincing enough to take probably a racist all-white jury, to look hard enough into their hearts to recognize that there wasn't a case there. But, I mean, that's the reality of this situation. And, I've talked about this idea of a morality based on nouns and adjectives and a morality based on verbs and adverbs. When you have a morality that's based on nouns and adjectives, it's basically, if it's a white person or if it's a police officer, there's your noun, and if it's a black person, automatically the police officer is given the benefit of the doubt and assumed that his killing was justifiable. But if you look at the verb, a police officer killed a black man, the verb there is where the morality rests. And then the adverb, was it justifiable or not? That's where the morality rests. It's not in the nouns and the adjectives, it's in the verbs and the adverbs. And that's why I think Ferguson is such an important event, because it's bringing to the forefront the fact that African American people do not see law officers as upholding the law. And until, that issue is really addressed in these cities where people are harassed, you have these stop searches, and these are realities that I think a lot of privileged people in this country have no idea what people experience on a daily basis, and the real pain and suffering that goes on. I mean, you've got 80% of young African Americans have criminal, they've either been in jail or on parole or something. It's unbelievable. And this is why the new Jim Crow, this allows for a type of institutionalized discrimination. It's real, because if you get a felony offense, you no longer have the right to vote. You can't sit on a jury. So it's a new Jim Crow that's not being looked at and addressed.
And since the war on drugs in the 80s, by California's favorite actor, turned governor, turned president, just have to throw that in. The funny part about it is that drug offense and drug abuse was actually on the decrease when this war on drugs came. And one of the things that is really malevolent is the fact that not only are you not eligible to go back home and stay at home without putting undue stress on your parents or your loved ones, if it happens to be Section 8 housing, if it's a drug offense, okay, you can commit murder and get food stamps or an EBT card. But if it's a drug offense, all right, you can't even eat until you get on your feet. So therefore, not only are you a threat to your family being evicted if they are in Section 8 housing, but if they're not in Section 8 housing, then you become an automatic burden. So you have a man who now has come home, supposedly paid his time for the crime he's committed, but if it's a drug offense, and it's supposed to have been rescinded recently here in California, but I recommended one of the young men whom I serve in the community to go and apply for an EBT card, and I saw him recently, and he said they gave it to me, then they took it away. So now I need to find out if the bureaucracy is not up to date with the particular law. But I mean, how nefarious is that? That you are putting people in a position that the only thing they can do is commit more crime or go back to the life just to feed themselves. So this is problematic.
That's where Malcolm's example becomes really very prominent, in the sense that he was able to overcome those conditions. So having him, and that's why I think it's very important to talk about him, because for poor people, it was like Muhammad Ali. When Muhammad Ali fought, everybody in the neighborhood found a television, because he was the people's champ. He was going to take on the man. Ali was like us. He was one of us. And the same thing with Malcolm X. Malcolm, he didn't go to college. He didn't have the opportunities that a lot of people had, but he was articulate. He could out-debate the debaters. He could, he could out-intellectualize the intellectuals. So Malcolm was a source of great inspiration. And I think we need to let a lot of young people who are struggling with the cycle of incarceration, recidivism, who are struggling with all of these barriers to fair housing, employment opportunities, nutrition, etc., to know that you can overcome. But it's up to us to try to create nurturing communities that will help to facilitate it, because no one should have to stand alone. I know Native Dean made a song, I'm not afraid to stand alone.
Right.
We should make another song, no one should have to stand alone. Al-mu'min al-mu'min kal-bunyan yashuddu ba'dahu ba'da.
So that's a great segue into our first online question. Imam Zaid, you mentioned here the source of great inspiration. So this is a question for all three panelists. It's a bit of a personal question. It says, what is the most influential action or quote done or said by Malcolm X that speaks to you the most, and why? No, if the spirit moves you.
At one time, to be honest, because I would repeat it a lot, that the price of freedom is death.
Yeah, I think what speaks to me is certainly his quote dealing with the fact of being in the cage with the wolf, and being able to accept the help from unlikely allies to let us out. And then the progression of that as in its final years, like I stated before, there's three particular distinct periods in his life as a black Muslim, and then the transition period when he made the Hajj, and then the final period when he had really solidified some of his thoughts. I think that when he said that I am willing to work with, and I'm paraphrasing, but I'm willing to work with anyone who is willing to look out for the overall good of the people, of the struggle. That, to me, is a profound transition versus his earlier statement that he would give to the press. He said at an earlier time, I was a sensationalist because the press would always ask me questions trying to get a sensationalist response. And he said, I made a mistake by giving them that, but I knew that's what they want. And if I had to do it over again, I would do it over again. I wouldn't make such sensationalist statements like, a chicken coming home to roost and things like that. But he said if they would have asked me intelligent questions, I would have gave them intelligent answers. So, those things speak to me, and I try not to be a person who speaks from my hurt. And that's important, that we learn not to speak with the filters of hurt that we experience in life.
Yeah. While Shaykh Hamza is thinking about it, I didn't finish. I said early on, I was inspired by the price of freedom is death, but understanding that literally, but maturing and then studying the religion, understood the price of freedom is death, is the death of the ego and the death of the carnal appetites. That's the real liberating force.
One of the things that really struck me, I mean, there's so many. He was brilliant at the pithy, very concise epigram. But one of the things that I really appreciated was, that he said that we're a peaceful people. Our religion teaches be peaceful, but if somebody lays his hand on you, you send him to the cemetery. And then he said that's a good religion. That's an old time religion. That's a ma and pa religion. And I think the fundamental desire, the fundamental right of a human being to defend themselves, which really, there's so many places where, like the Palestinian situation is a really good example of that, where undeniably there's aspects to the resistance that trouble me deeply, but nobody looks at the circumstances that bring about those those types of approaches to resistance. But the fundamental right to resist people taking over your we used to have a law called the castle law, which basically anybody that came into your house, you had a right to kill them. That's a very fundamental human right to defend your hearth and home, to defend your family, your children. And in that way, I mean, Islam is not a turn the other cheek religion at that, but it is a peaceful religion. It teaches people to be peaceful, but you have a right, to defend yourself. And I think that it's been abused undeniably a lot, but that is a human right.
Yeah, there's a question here that I want to get to, but just a brief comment first. In Chris Hedges' article on Monday that he wrote about Malcolm, he quotes, and I can't remember the first name of the journalist, but he spent some time with Malcolm. Last name was Goldman, and in his quote, he says he's speaking about the death of history. That now with Twitter and 24-hour news cycles, that no one is reading history anymore. And it was just something that you did in high school. And then you move on to college and you take on economics and all of these other things. And there's really nothing left of liberal arts education. That's bringing the death of history. But what he says, though, is that Malcolm was more, that Dr. King was more known. But what people know about him today is that he had a quote that said, "I have a dream," and that there's a day off attached to his name. So in this reductionist kind of consumption that Malcolm has been reduced to by any means necessary, that there can be this claim that there's those Muslims again speaking about militancy and speaking about this kind of, aggression and belligerence. So the question is, from our audience, how do we balance Malcolm's militancy with what's currently happening today in the Ummah? Muslims are being attacked all over the world. We want peace, but we need more action. And I'll leave that open. That Shaykh Hamza, that question was for you.
What's interesting is, Muslims are seen as violent, but the truth of the matter is that in the last 30 or 40 years, the amount of violence that has been aggressed upon the Muslim community and nation, I mean, if you look at just the numbers and the amount of dead Muslims there are right now, and again, it gets back to this idea, and I think the whole race language, for me, needs reformulation because, I think Islam, one of the powers of our religion is that it really looks at jahiliyyah and this idea of ignorance. And I think when Malcolm said that, what causes this thing, I really think he identified the core issue, that it's about ignorance. The Syrians are as white as the moon, but their lives don't matter. Because in the end of the day, they're wogs or whatever, ragheads or whatever term, and sand nigger is a term that is used for Arabs, and the same is true for the Irish historically. If you study their history, again, of people as white as the moon, or the Welsh. I was on a plane once from Scotland, going to London, and I sat next to a Scottish fellow, and he couldn't wait to get to London to see the outcome of the Irish-English soccer game. And I said, who are you rooting for? And he said, the Irish. I was like, why? And he said, Celts. It's like, screw England. Yeah. He's Scottish. In the end of the day, even though he doesn't really relate that much to the Irish, they're closer, ethnically, than they were to the Anglo-Saxons. So, there's so much, there are so many traumatized peoples out there, and the Muslims have been profoundly traumatized of late, and I think that we're going to be dealing with this stuff for the rest of our lives. Mm-hmm. It's not going to go away. Mm-hmm. I mean, the Afghan condition, it's 40 years of war now. Yeah. It's Somalia. Somalia, failed state. Somalia, beautiful culture. Really, I mean, I know Somalians pretty well. I spent a lot of time with Somalians. I lived in the Emirates, and there was a lot of Somalians. I had very close Somali friends. Beautiful traditional Shafi'i Qadri culture. And they are victims of the Cold War because Somalia was an important strategic place for these, what they call slacks or sea lanes of communication. You know, in the pirates, right? I mean, the Somali pirates, you study the fishing, what's happened to their fishing, the waters, and the fact that all these fish, you know, the Japanese and the Russians come in and just scoop up all this fish, and they can't survive anymore. So looking at these problems, that we have to look at them at a much deeper level, you know. But I don't, the Muslims, you know, I think fish, I mentioned his book, Are Muslims Distinctive? You know, he shows that Muslim cultures, when they're stable, have much lower murder rates. They're far less violent than other cultures. And that's my experience of Muslims. They're not violent people by nature.
I think this question is, we need more action. I don't think we need more action. We need more institutions. We need more thought. We need more purposeful action. Our actions, to a certain extent, our political strategizing has, to a certain extent, been taken over by the left in the West. And generally, the left has the perfect analysis. It has the perfect protest model, but it doesn't build anything. And Muslims have always been builders. Malcolm was a builder. Yeah, Malcolm was, he was angry. He was strident, but he built many of, he's opened up temples, mosques, all over the East Coast, the West Coast, the Midwest. He was instrumental in starting the newspaper. He built the FOI, largely. There were others who contributed. So Malcolm was a builder. And unless we translate the anger and the angst and the positive institutional building so that institutions can magnify our individual strength and our individual passion, we're going to be protesting forever. And at a certain point, you know, you have to get on with it. I'm not saying protest isn't important, but protest divorced from institutional building, divorced from some levels of systemic involvement, is going to yield very little as far as I see it, and it would just be knee-jerk. And once someone knows they can get your knee to jerk, they'll be banging with the rubber hammer forever. It's like, bam.
I remember in Newark, New Jersey, and in places in the East, they would have what's called, the black Muslims will open up places called Your Bakery and Your Butcher Shops. And I don't know if any of you are young enough, or old enough, I should say, to remember that, but they still, to this particular day, sell, I mean, I'm still a avid fan of Your bean pies, but they started developing vehicles for economic independence. And that's powerful, in particular, in this particular, double particulars, in this milieu, that you need to be able to feed yourself and take care of yourself and empower yourself and be able to provide for your families. And you see even in this area, people who are coming over from different countries, in particular the Yemenis and others, regardless of how you feel about what business they open their business where they can take care of themselves. And when you start working toward economic independence, then you will find sometimes pressure from others who don't want you to become economically independent. When Dr. King started talking about wages and war and things that were siphoning off the wealth and the resources of this nation that should go to others, then you find that he didn't live long.
Threat escalates.
Yeah.
And he was becoming more and more militant in his approach. I mean, everybody talks about the peaceful, loving, but if you, those last speeches he was making were sounding more and more like Malcolm. You know, it's interesting.
There's a point of convergence. Like Malcolm started, Dr. King ended up where Malcolm was, and Malcolm ended up where Dr. King was. Malcolm ended up talking about the need to move out into the wider community, build alliances and coalitions. human rights. And then Dr. King ended up talking about human rights as opposed to civil rights. Dr. King ended up talking about American militarism, racism, the things Malcolm was talking about early on. And Malcolm ended up talking about a broader community, the ability to get along and to have a brotherhood and sisterhood. So I think there was definitely a convergence between the two, if you look. And
well, it's interesting that the two, I mean, to me, these are probably the two most significant voices of that generation, and that there's a Jalali and a Jamali element to the two voices, because God speaks, God speaks through, he has a majestic, he reveals himself majestically and he reveals himself beautifully to creation, depending on the circumstances.
That's right.
And so, Malcolm played the role of Amos. He was a great voice in the prophetic tradition. And just for Muslims, because we've got Muslims online. When he was talking about, the Reverend was talking about, as all prophets do, it's important that that's, even in Christianity, that's not understood to me a prophet like a prophet, but the prophetic voice becomes embodied in people, and in that way that they're the inheritors of prophets. Warathatul Anbiya are those voices that emerge and rise up in a community, and he played that role of the prophetic voice of speaking in the face of the Pharaoh, coming and as Moses did, and in that way his voice is a Mosaic voice. Malcolm's voice was a Mosaic voice.
And a question here which brings in media, and at the end of Malcolm's life, Malcolm was talking a lot about the role of media and manipulation, and this idea in making your friends look like your enemies and your enemies look like your friends. And I think we all kind of understand the transformation that happened after Mecca, or after his pilgrimage. Shaykh Hamza, there's a question here with regard to race that is being asked to you directly. It says, "What is the role of a white convert to Islam in fighting racism?"
Yeah, I think.
Is it different than others?
I think, I just feel like these adjectives don't define me personally. I've never felt white. Imam Zaid knows my mother. I was raised with pictures of Emilio Zapata in the house, and my mother's reading list was things like Soul on Ice, and she took me to see the Soledad Brothers at the Marin County Courthouse. So I was raised with a consciousness about oppression, and that oppression's wrong, and that you should always side with the oppressed. What Islam did for me was give me an understanding of helping the oppressor as well. That recognizing the Prophet ﷺ said, "Unsur akhaka zaliman aw madluma." And I think that's the power of Islam, is that these people need help. They really do need help. And if you can educate people and help them to understand that. To be honest with you, since I became Muslim, I was given my name. I just thought, okay, this is what you have to do. Because when I became Muslim, the guy said, your name's, I was actually Abdul Wahid. Salman Abdul Wahid was the name I was first given. And then it got changed to Hamza. So, I just thought, okay, that's my name. Since then, I haven't been white. I've been a Muslim. People treat me totally different when I tell what my name is. Right. Where are you from?
Yeah, right.
I'm from here. But originally, where are you from? Yeah. And so this idea of white privilege, right. If you're a Muslim, right. There's no white privilege. Mm-hmm. I've been pulled out of those lines at the airport many, many times, mm-hmm. right? Mm-hmm. I've been harassed by those people. Mm-hmm. So, I had a white convert told me that she had no idea, but putting on the hijab, that she was joining an oppressed minority. And she really felt it. She said for the first time in her life, she really felt what it was like, you know. And, you know, my wife's Native American. My kids are half Hispanic. My family is very ethnically diverse, everything from African American to Jewish you know, I mean, I'm from this state, which, you know, the Bay Area in particular, it's a different place. So I don't think personally in those terms, but I'm very aware of that. And so it's always been an important part, you know, of my life, of just being on the side of those who are not giving a fair shake.
Yeah, I think that's kind of probably a serious white man's burden, excuse the pun, but to kind of handle all that. But I do reflect one thing, and that is after 9/11, for a brief couple of years, it was okay to be a black man because they stopped pulling us over and started pulling you over, unfortunately. So we got a brief respite for being the minority, the big bad minority, and then of course, you know, they're killing us at a rate that's unprecedented since the Middle Passage. But the human condition is more important. I think the soul will speak out despite the particular physicality of who we are. And that's the thing. What cries out is the soul of individuals, more so than just the privilege. So if we are a group of people who are carnal by nature and don't allow our soul to be really in tune with the great maker of souls, then it's easy to rest in our privilege. I come from being a poor black project kid from Brooklyn who delved in crime and all of that stuff, and to becoming the person who actually is doing some good for the community. But I believe that my soul was developed and nurtured so that it could overcome what would be my fate. My fate should have been prison or the grave. But my soul was developed by individuals and by God to kind of supersede my ethnicity and my environment and my perceived destiny.
Yeah, I think that it is important to look at what various people can do in their particular context to address those who they're more familiar with. And I mean, there's some places you can go in this country and you think like you weren't even in America anymore. And if you're not from there, you might not have a problem, but you really can't effectively communicate with the people there. So I think there's definitely some credence given to that question directed to Shaykh Hamza to a certain extent. And I think Shaykh Hamza qualified that in a very beautiful way. But saying that, I think as a community, we have to ask ourselves, what are we going to do as a community to address white privilege, every other kind of privilege? And so if we're going to be an exemplary community that can demonstrate to the country that it is possible to get to this space that Malcolm saw, at least in the Hajj, if we're not going to extrapolate from that and say all Muslim societies are free of race prejudice, at least he saw it in the Hajj, or what Toynbee envisioned. If we're going to get to that space, we're going to have to, as a community, take as a mission that we are going to be the community that makes sure what Du Bois said. I used to say Du Bois because that's just my educational background.
I think they go by Du Bois.
Du Bois.
Yeah.
Du Bois too.
It is Du Bois.
It's
yeah.
Du Bois,
but
Du Bois.
But in French, it's Du Bois.
Du Bois.
Yeah.
Anyway, but he said the 20th century is going to be the problem of the color line. So if the 21st century is not going to be the problem of the color line as the definitive issue that continues to vex American society as a community, not what the Caucasian or white Muslims or whatever, or the African American Muslims or the Latino Muslims or the Pakistani Muslims or the Egyptian Muslims or the Mish'arif A Muslims are going to do about racism and prejudice and privilege. What are we as a community going to do about it? Because at the end of the day, this is a communal project and mission and vision.
That's right.
And so I think we have to begin to think of this beyond the categorizations that it's American society have bequeathed to us. Black and white people were invented in America.
MashaAllah.
Black people were invented in America. In Africa, you have Hausa, Fulani, Wolof, Mandinka. You don't have black people as a category. And in Europe, you have Gauls and Franks and Swedes and Danes and Celts and Irish.
And there's tribal, attitudes.
But you don't have white people as a class. These are American inventions. So either we're going to legitimize them by categorizing how we engage these as Muslims,
That's right.
or we're going to delegitimize them and ultimately destroy them. And so we can be humans.
If you look also, in the Muslim world, like there's all this talk about the racism in the Muslim world, and there's definitely tribalism, but and there's attitudes, there's attitudes about color, which always bothered me a lot. Like the Hindu word for caste is varna, which means color, and the Hindu system was definitely a color system because the Shudra and the Dalit were the darkest people and the Brahmin were the lightest skin. So it's something very weird that has been going on for a long time. And certainly the Muslims differentiate between the Abd, who was black, and the Mamluk, who was the white slave.
Yeah.
So they actually differentiate between, but they did take white slaves, from Europe. But there was a differentiation. But the one thing about the Muslims is that they never had a racism or a type of prejudice that prevented them from eating together, from worshiping together. They never had that. And that's still true in the Muslim world.
Yeah.
And so there are those attitudes, there's ignorance. And one of the most beautiful hadiths about this is Abu Dhar, when he called that woman, Ibn Sauda, which is like, the black woman's son, as a derogatory phrase. The Prophet ﷺ, he didn't say you're a racist. He said, Anta imru'un fik al-jahiliya. You're a man who still has ignorance in him. And in other words, work on that. You're not there yet. And that's a really important aspect that this, we have now, a lot of social sciences about just mothers preferring, the attractive babies to ugly babies. The fact that, darker skinned babies actually even have, less attention in family. So, there's really these are deep problems.
Right.
And that's why education is the only solution to these problems.
In closing, I want to ask each of you for a very succinct response here, please. And please share with the audience in your opinion, the single most important piece of advice from this evening that an audience member can take back with them to reflect on the sustained engagement of Malcolm's legacy.
Embrace Malcolm in his fullness, his complexities, his nuances, and balance. Don't take one part of Malcolm and leave the other. Don't take Malcolm, the firebrand, radical, and leave Malcolm, the family man, the dedicated husband, the devoted father. Don't take Malcolm, the critic of the white supremacy or whatever, but and leave Malcolm the institution builder. As Shaykh Hamza mentioned, don't take Malcolm the finished product, the debater, the orator, and leave Malcolm the tireless reader, voracious reader, insatiable quest for knowledge. Take Malcolm in his fullness. Take Malcolm in all of his humanity. Take Malcolm in his sincerity and his passion and his devotion. Take all of Malcolm, and hopefully you'll have a good life.
Pastor Flemming.
In my particular case, I think the journey of Malcolm, from a young criminal to a person who, when dealt the blow of injustice, 10-year term for something, first-time offense of burglary, took that time and developed himself and drilled down deeper. I think a lot of time, like my colleague says, that we tend to be reactionary. We don't want to drill down deeper into the root causes of things. Malcolm, through his studies, he drilled down deeper. And then he was a tireless advocate for the empowerment and the improvement of all humanity, and it was a progress. But he went there, and he served humanity well in his season. So I think if we can serve humanity well in our season, there's a verdict, and it's a scene that we find in the New Testament of the Christian Bible that is a judgment scene where in Matthew chapter 25, we see Jesus sitting on the throne with his heavenly host, judging between the sheep and the goats. And his litmus test for acceptance into paradise in heaven was, did you feed me when I was hungry? Did you visit me when I was in prison? Did you give me clothes when I was naked? Did you have concern for me? And those people said, well, when did we ever see you that way? He said, when you did this for the least of these, to the very least in society, the marginalized, the oppressed, the ones without power, the fatherless, the widow, then you've done it for me. Welcome to my reward. And for those who did not do these things, he said, depart from me, I know you not. So I believe Malcolm served the human family well, with patience, with knowledge, and with sincerity. And if we can do that, I think we will have pleased our Creator. And what more could we ask for than that?
Bismillah. In the end, Malcolm's body is gone, but his soul was a universal soul, and I think that he transcends his color and his background, and to me he's an inspiration for all time, and I think as long as people are reading and studying, his book is going to resonate in hearts. Dr. Omar Abdullah, who's a Euro-American convert to Islam, converted because of Malcolm's book. It spoke to him as a Euro-American. And I think that's the universal reality. The Prophet ﷺ in Sahih Bukhari, when a Jewish funeral was passing by, and this was at a time when there was a lot of heightened tension between the Jews and the Muslims in Medina, the Prophet stood up, and one of his Sahabas said, it's a Jew. And he said, "Awalaysat nafsa? Isn't it a human soul?" And so what the Prophet was honoring was a soul going back to its Lord. And Al-Hajj Malik Shabazz he's a shaheed in our tradition, and a shaheed is in Greek, the martyr also means witness. He's a witness, and he's a witness to the truth. And he spoke the truth, and he spoke it from his heart, and that's why it resonated in the hearts of others. And finally, the Quran says, and Qadi Abu Bakr ibn al-Arabi says in his tafsir, that the heavens and the earth stood on edge when it heard this verse. وَمَا أُمِرُوا إِلَّا لِيَعْبُدُوا اللَّهَ مُخْلِصِينَ لَهُ الدِّينَ. They were only commanded to be sincere in their worship to their Lord. And so him wanting to be remembered as a mukhlis.
That's right.
He got the message.
MashaAllah. MashaAllah. Inshallah. So we thank our distinguished panels, and we thank all of you who have come out this evening to join us in this conversation, and those of you who are online, who joined us on the online platform, we thank you. We thank our faculty, our staff, and our students who made this evening possible through their hard work and dedication, and particularly the students of the Third Resurrection at Zaytuna Campus Group. There are just a few things I want to mention that our co-founders will be in a few areas in Detroit on February 22nd, in the Bay Area on March 7th, in Orlando on March 14th. If you are near any of those areas, please come and join us, and also come out, inshallah ta'ala, God willing, on February 17th to hear a second lecture for Black History Month by Dr. John Powell, who is at the Haas School of Business, right in this same place. So with that, Imam Zaid, we ask you to please just close us out with a supplication. We can call Imam Ibrahim back up. Imam Ibrahim, would you please come, and I will trade seats with you, and close us out in supplication, please. Then there's true love.
We direct our attention to the Lord upon high, Allah, as we call him. We ask him to accept this assembly tonight. Rabbana Ameen. We ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to accept the work of Al-Hajj Malik Shabbaz. Rabbana Ameen. We ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to bless his work. Rabbana Ameen. We ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to forgive his sins. Rabbana Ameen. We ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to elevate him in rank. Rabbana Ameen. We ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to materialize his dream, his good dream for the hope and prosperity of his people and all of the sons and daughters of Adam. Rabbana Ameen. We ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to make his martyrdom that he has given to the world a symbol of inspiration and hope to all of the disadvantaged young people of the world who can find inspiration in his life to change the world as he changed it in his day. Rabbana Ameen. We ask Allah, God Almighty, to bless the students who have put on this program this evening. We ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to bless our college. We ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to bless our administrators. We ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to open the hearts of those who have witnessed this production, that they will support it, that they will donate. We ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to bless us all where we have come from our homes and our destinations back to our homes, to make that a safe journey back home tonight. We ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to bless us in every way. We ask him for the reward of paradise. We ask him for the reward of seeing, finally having Allah on the day of judgment, after he has been gracious and merciful to us, granting us all paradise, that he finally unveil the veil that covers his holy face, so that we can once finally look upon, gaze upon, and glory and awe the face of the Lord, the maker of us all. These things we ask in the name of Allah, the Lord who is one. Wa subhana rabbina rabbil izzati amma yasifun, wa salamun ala al-mursaleen, walhamdulillahi rabbil alameen. Ameen.
Thank you for being a sustainer of Zaytuna College as a member of 12,000 Strong. Tell your friends and family about the benefits of supporting America's first Muslim liberal arts college.